Hello and welcome to HR Bytes, a podcast and video series to bring you stories of HR professionals who bring a think globally and act locally digital HR agenda to their work. Everyday people who are driving digital transformations in their organizations, data-driven and future-fit digital HR leaders. This is your host, Jay Polaki, and today's guest needs no introduction. Welcome to the show, Lars. I'm so happy to have you on the show today.
Yeah, Jay, thanks for having me on.
Absolutely. So, Lars, I'm going to start with that dreaded interview question. Tell us a little bit about yourself and your journey in writing Redefine HR.
Well, let's see. I'm a dad. I am an entrepreneur. I'm a writer, podcaster. Lots of slashes there. I've been in the field for a little over 20 years. A lot of that on the corporate side, running global recruiting and talent teams at Ticketmaster, Magento, and NPR, and then started my own firm, Amplify, about a little over 7 years ago. And so now I do a mix of consulting and HR executive search, and then editorial projects. The book is kind of the culmination of a lot of where I've been spending my time and what I've been thinking about for the last probably 7 years, since co-founding the HR Open Source Initiative, which is a global nonprofit, to having talks and covering modern HR for an earlier book I wrote on employer branding and a column I have in Fast Company. And so I've been writing all these individual pieces on aspects of modern HR for years. And I felt it was time that I wrote something more kind of cohesive to tie them all together and kind of paint a picture for what HR can look like at its best.
Absolutely. And the human resources function has definitely met the challenges of 2020, and we're ready to continue building on all that learning from 2020, right? And your book certainly has raised the bar in the way we show up and show that we care for our employees. So how do you see the people function influence change in our organizations and adopt courageous initiatives while facing the even more myriad challenges of 2021?
Yeah, I mean, look, I think that, one of the core principles that I convey in the book is that the field of HR is really a spectrum. So you have, at the leading edge, you have those modern companies that are doing all those things that you mentioned. On the other side of that, there are some companies that are still kind of stuck in legacy practices and kind of working their way out of that. And that's not necessarily their fault. It could be the organization, the culture, the executive team. And then you have a big group in the middle. So I think as you look at how we've gone through 2020, it was a hairy, difficult, challenging year for everybody, let alone the field of HR, who were on the front lines of that for their organizations, their teams, their employees and themselves. And so I think it was, the events of 2020 put a unique strain on HR practitioners and HR leaders, even more specifically. And so I think that the ones that have really, the companies that have fared the best had progressive, action-oriented, but also compassionate HR leaders that were able to help all of those different constituents navigate through, the difficulties of the year as best they could. And so I think we're entering 2021 with, we still have a lot of scars from that in a moment, and we're not through it yet. So, definitely there's lots of cause for optimism, and I share that optimism, but we're still in some difficult times that we're, collectively working through. So there's a light at the end of the tunnel, but we're not at that light yet.
Absolutely. Like you said, leadership is now asking every team to do more with less because this is the nature of our lives now. And in such a scenario, the adoption of technology by HR teams for all aspects of our function is inevitable. So how do you think we should accelerate the adoption of a digital mindset in our people function?
Yeah, I mean, there was a report from McKinsey earlier, I think about a month ago, that said the pandemic accelerated the digitization of business by 4 years. And the shift to remote, most business leaders expected it would take them a year to make that transition. On average, they did it in 7 days. granted, there's a global pandemic forcing their hand, but it proved that there is, if there is an appetite, there's a capability in embracing digital technologies and change. And I think, especially as we continue moving through the pandemic, for those of us who had employees that were able to work safely from home, and that's an aspect of the job, and not all employees can do that based on their roles, but for those that can, most of those companies are going to be hybrid by default. To what extent they're hybrid, that's gonna vary. But you're going to have some employees who are desperate to get back into an office. They're going to do that as soon as it's safe to do so. You have some employees who are never going to come back in your office. And so we have to be really smart and practical with how we're deploying and leveraging digital technologies to ensure that the employee experience for our employees who aren't in an office 5 days a week is as strong as those that are. And so I think in that sense, it's a huge catalyst for us in the right direction. But the question, whether to digitize or not is no longer the right question. I mean, it wasn't the right question before the pandemic. It's certainly not now. We have to embrace that.
Absolutely. And in this experience economy, we have to definitely provide that individualized, engaging, and consumer grade experience that you were talking about for all our employees, irrespective of where they're working, whether they're working from home or in the office, or they're kind of in this hybrid mode. And there are very few components more fundamental, I think, to HR in 2021 and beyond to make this happen than analytics. And you speak about this in your book as well. So how do you see the changing relationship of the HR function with data and our active contributions to meaningful workforce evaluation and evolution?
Yeah, I mean, it's a couple of things, really. I think, data isn't new for HR necessarily. Like we've had data since I was crunching Excel spreadsheets, 15 years ago. I still have, nightmares of some of those reports that I had to build manually. But, now what's changed is that, we've gotten much better at leveraging technology, and we've become much more sophisticated in what we do with the data and how we interpret the data, and now the analytics to actually extract insights. And in some cases, predictive insights to kind of know what's going to happen before it even happens. Like that's the holy grail of data and people analytics. So I think we've gotten a lot more sophisticated. We have, if you look at best in class companies, they have actual data scientists in their HR team helping interpret and analyze that data and extract insights from it. So I think it's important. I think we always have to, it's easy to get smitten in the conversation around data as if, data in and of itself raises the impact of HR. And data, it's not just about being able to collect and interpret data. The art is how you tell stories with data, how you use that data, combine it with your HR acumen, and in some cases kind of intuition based on your experience to be able to tell a story with the data that leads to influence and outcomes. So I think we, it's easy for us to get caught up in the hype around data itself. But I think we have to look at it holistically in the broader context of how we not just gather, but also use that data, package that data in a way that drives business outcomes.
Absolutely. And I was reading something about also, asking for the story behind the data, not just using the data to tell the story, but asking for the story behind the data, because sometimes the statistics really don't tell the story that the real story, right? So that's an important aspect too.
Yeah. I mean, look, you can pull data to tell any story. You can manipulate data to tell the story you want to tell. It's not necessarily the right story. And we do have to be mindful of things like ethical data, how to leverage and interpret the data in an ethical way. We have to be aware of, DEI when it comes to data and bias, and, make sure we have diverse ranges of employees evaluating and assessing that data. If you have a room full of, white male data scientists all interpreting that data, you might not get the right outcomes and actions out of that data. So I think those are all additional components that we have to think about beyond just the data.
Absolutely. And today, HR teams are being asked to start with the problem that they're trying to solve, and not with the solution as part of their digital transformation journeys as well, right? So they're kind of being asked to take on that entrepreneurial and product mindset that you also talk about in your book. So what's one piece of advice you have for our HR colleagues who are looking to adopt new technology in their function?
So the first thing I'd probably say is that the field of HR is so vast right now. The field of HR technology, I should say, you can't know everything that is happening right now. Analysts can't know everything that's happening right now. There's just too much. There's billions of dollars of venture capital being poured into the field. What I would recommend, a couple of recommendations. One would be prioritize your technology needs based on your business needs. So there's lots of cool technology out there that can do lots of cool things and solve lots of difficult problems. They might not be the difficult problems that your organization has. So even though there might be a hype bubble around things like AI or automation, and yes, there's values in those categories, but are they the right values for you? And obviously, we all have limited budgets, we have finite resources, so you have to be able to. It's almost limitless what you can buy from an HR tech space. You've got to really prioritize the technology around the business problems that you specifically and your organization are trying to solve. That should be the driver of where you invest, not just what's getting the most hype right now, because hype cycles around HR tech can be massive, and they can, if you don't guard yourself against that, you could easily fall down that path and buy tech that you don't really need, or buy tech that is great tech, but it's not necessarily solving the problems that you're facing.
Great insights. And when you say that, what comes to the fore for me is that, we are all being asked to uplift our employees and empower our organizations, and so that we can lead and remain competitive in this global HR space. And we are being asked to take on so many different new technologies. So that call to action to uplift and empower our organizations also goes hand in hand with the independent thinking that we need to kind of involve in this process, and make that decision to adopt the right technology, and also ask the question why we need the technology in the first place to resolve a certain issue or problem in our HR space. So great insights. I also think that with the advances in technology, our ability to prepare our HR function for this increase in remote and hybrid work has definitely increased like tenfold. What do you think we as HR professionals can do more to prepare our function to adopt to this increase in hybrid work?
Yeah, I mean, I think that it happens a couple different ways, right? Like, one is educating our leadership, our executive team, of what our reality is now, and where it's shifting towards. Because there's a lot of executives out there that may have older school mindsets, and they're kind of we talk about the light at the end of the tunnel of the pandemic. They're seeing that light as like, cool, everybody comes back to the office. And you have to kind of let them know, like, that's not really going to be the reality for many organizations. And if you hold to that, if you're forcing everybody to come back, you're going to have some real turnover issues, because people don't have to go back in the office if they don't want to. I think that the key word for 2021 and beyond is choice. It's employee choice. So that's one. I think number two is really doing a much better job of listening and creating feedback loops with your employee population, so that you can understand what their needs are, what their gaps are, where sentiment is across the business organization. That's harder to do, especially if you're used to being co-located in an office, and now you've got employee populations that are remote, and even once we start going back into the office. So making sure that you're listening, you're pulse checking, you're being more proactive in terms of gathering that employee feedback and employee sentiment. And then the third piece is going to be, I think the majority of businesses who had employees kind of working from home during this time, when we are on the other side of this, they're going to be hybrid by default. And again, like I mentioned, how much hybrid is going to be dependent on the organization. But the risk is, and the challenge is, of the three models, co-located, fully distributed, or hybrid's the hardest. it's the most difficult to manage from an HR and people standpoint. And that's going to be the biggest reality for most of us. So in terms of best practices, it's really important for us to try to engineer our policies and our programs and our kind of, HR operating system, if you will, as remote by default, so that wherever employees are, if they're in an office, if they're remote, they're all, it's an even playing field for all of them. I think that the challenge is most organizations never really reoriented their policy around distributed who have been remote. So they're just going to go right back to the way it is and that's going to create almost two classes of employees, where people who come into an office are going to have an inherent advantage to doing so. And those who are remote are going to, be disadvantaged by doing so. So that, none of that is easy, but all of those are things that, HR and people operators need to be thinking about right now.
Shifting sands of HR evolution. Absolutely. So that brings us to our question connection section, the funner part of our conversation. But I did have a couple of questions from our audience. I polled them before our interview today. And so some of the questions they asked were, what's one future-ready skill that organizations should absolutely develop today that you think organizations should develop?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to pick one because I think there's a lot of things, but I think in this would apply to others as well, as agility. And when I say agile, I don't mean, scrum boards and stand-up meetings, although you could do that. But I mean more moving away from our, the legacy approach in HR is we have a playbook for how we do different aspects of the role. So performance playbook, learning playbook, recruiting playbook. Playbooks don't really fit the dynamic times that we're in. And so when I say agile, not being locked into a legacy way of doing things because that's the way you've always done things. Maybe it is the best way. I'm not saying blow everything up and start from scratch, but have those conversations where you're like, if we built this from the ground up today, would it look the same? Would it look significantly different? If the latter is your answer, you might want to prioritize re-engineering some of those processes. So I think agile in mindset, lightweight in approach, I think that is really a key kind of characteristic of modern HR that we're going to need for the future.
Wonderful. And in your experience, what do you think should be the fundamental mindset shift that HR needs to bring in to be able to redefine HR? And at what pace should we be doing it?
So I'll tackle the first question first. I think having a growth mindset over a fixed mindset is incredibly important. The pace of change is happening so fast, and there's so many external factors that are impacting our work. If we don't have a growth mindset, if we're not prioritizing our own learning, if we're not looking at learning agility as something that is an essential skill set for modern HR operators, it's going to be really hard for us to keep pace with these changes. And so if you're really looking about redefining HR and kind of building the future, you've got to have that growth mindset. You've got to be willing to learn. You've got to be prioritizing that in the flow of your work so that you can keep pace and add more value to the business. What is the timeline? There isn't one. And by there isn't one, I mean that it's so subjective. I think, every organization is different. What we can't do is we can't say, make blanket statements like we all have to be embracing X by Y date. That doesn't work. Some companies are doing Y now. Some companies are 10 years away from Y. And there's a range of factors. So I think it's similar to why I don't use the term best practices, because I think that's it's a best practice for one specific organization, given all of their uniquely distinct variables that no other company has. But I think your timeline is what is right for you. What I'd like to see more of is basically just that we're all working towards leveling up our capabilities and our processes, but I don't think you can put a timeline on what that process should look like, because every organization is going to be different in terms of the blockers or enablers they have that can lead to those outcomes.
Wonderful. And, what might organizations and leaders do to include HR as a core business function and not simply like a business enablement function?
Open your eyes. I mean, I'll give you a more practical answer, but I think my answer also depends, as I mentioned, kind of that spectrum of HR. In those leading organizations, like what much of my book kind of focuses on that leading edge, they're there. They don't have to prove anything. They already have, there's no discussions around seat at the table. There's no discussion around like executive credibility. Like they're in there and they're all of that. So they can just run and they can operate and they have the respect of the business. Beyond that group, there's again, across that spectrum, people are at different stages. So I think probably one of the most important things that HR and people operators can do to get to that outcome is really focus on developing their own business acumen, right? It's not enough to just have HR acumen. It's not enough just to understand compensation practices inside and out, or learning practices inside and out. You have to understand the business. You have to understand what the revenue model is for the business. You have to understand what the 3-year plan is. You have to understand what the go-to-market strategy is. You have to understand what the risks to the business are, so that with that understanding, you can speak their language. So you're not just, it's not just, quote unquote, soft HR talk. You can actually talk about business drivers and outcomes, but then you can develop and align and prioritize your people programs and strategy to support that business and measure how one is enabling the other. So I think when you do that, then the business value and impact of the function is clear. But you have to, we're not necessarily wired that way by default. So you have to make the effort to get there.
The intentional part of redefining HR right there.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So now that we've answered our audience questions, we come back to our fun conversation. Who is one person you've gained in your network? I know it's difficult, but one person you've gained in your network in the last year that you think more people should know about in the HR tech space?
Ooh, in the HR tech specifically space, that I'd think about. I mean, when I look at HR tech, and I'm cheating a little bit because this isn't somebody that I met in the last year, but George Laroque is one of my favorite thinkers and minds in the space. He's an analyst, and he gets it. He shares. He works openly and collaboratively, and like I said, even the analysts can't keep pace with what's going on in the space, but he does a pretty good job of staying on top of everything. So he's who I look to when I need to, kind of get a better understanding of a particular vertical or a segment within the space.
And we'll link his profile in our show notes for the audience. Thank you. What's your favorite HR podcast? I know you have a couple of podcasts of your own, and I'm a big fan of them. But what is your favorite HR podcast?
I'm probably copping out, and this is maybe a little bit of a weird answer, but to be honest, like I don't listen to a lot of podcasts. There's a couple of podcasts that I hear and I like. I'd say Adam Grant's is probably my favorite in HR. If you would call that HR, I mean, I think it's more business broadly, but certainly there's a heavy people analytic. But it's probably weird, but as somebody who produces a podcast, I don't listen to a ton of podcasts, but I do make a point to listen to Adam's stuff. And there's lots of other great, Laurie Ruettimann's podcast is great. Chad and Cheese is great. There's lots of other great episodes. Spotify's got a new podcast that's really good out of their HR team. But yeah, I would say if I had to pick one, it would be Work Life by Adam Grant. But yeah, I'd also qualify that by saying that I'm sure there's tons of great HR podcasts out there that just aren't on my radar because I don't listen to as many podcasts as you might think that I do based on producing a show.
Well, you're not alone. There are lots of folks out there who produce podcasts like me and you who do not listen to as many. So there you go. If we were to turn a chapter of your book into a flip book, what's that one chapter you would like us to do into a flip book?
It would be chapter 3, Building a Company for Everyone. It was a chapter that focused on diversity, equity, belonging, and inclusion. And I would pick it as a flip book because I think the message and the content and the work that we have to do in the space can use all the additional resources that we can bring to bear. So if that would help get the attention of some more practitioners and kind of open their minds up to some of the work that we need to do in HR, then I'm all for flip books. I'm all for whatever vehicles might do that.
How long did it take you to write this book?
I would say probably 4 months with an asterisk, meaning, I had just started the book when the pandemic hit, and then I didn't write a single word for 2 months.
Wow.
Then I started writing again. So there's a big kind of, block of time during the writing process that I didn't write. I was working on some open source projects and other things. So but I'd say if I, looking back, probably about, 4 months of total, writing time.
Wow. That is fast.
Yeah. I mean, I had a very clear idea of what I wanted to say and even how I wanted to say it. And I also had some personal essays and quotes that I pulled from the podcast and stories into the book. So that also helped me think about it. And before I even signed the book deal, I had already kind of mapped out what I viewed as like a framework for modern HR. And that was really what the book was based on. It was actually the kind of very early origins of it was a piece that I wrote in Fast Company around, I think it was 10 ways that HR will look different in 2020 that I wrote in Q4 2019. And those then became kind of the foundational elements that carried over to the book. So yeah, I think I had a lot of the framework for it in place before I had to actually, manufacture 80,000 words.
Yeah, well, it's a great read. I love reading it. So I recommend it to all our audience. You must read Redefining HR.
I appreciate that. Thank you very much.
Absolutely. And where would you like to travel after the pandemic?
Everywhere. 2020 before the pandemic hit, my travel plans had me in Auckland, New Zealand, Berlin, Paris, London, Stockholm. I had a lot of interesting destinations on my radar that never happened. So I don't know. I need to go somewhere with my family first. We haven't traveled for over a year, and we're all dying to do something. Hopefully, that's going to involve the beach, maybe Disney for our girls. When that's safe to do so. But yeah, I'd love to do that. I'm definitely overdue for a trip to London. I've got a lot of friends there and some events that I've missed. So there, and then California. I've got some great friends and family in both Northern and Southern California. So I think that'll be on the list as well. But I can't give you just one because there's so many places I'm dying to get to. But a beach is definitely high on the priority list.
Well, let's hope you get to that beach first then.
Let's hope.
So, Lars, you give back to the HR community and the community you live in myriad ways. How do you enjoy giving back to our HR community specifically?
Yeah, I mean, it's a driving factor in all the work that I do. And for me, it's like, there's a selfish element to that. Like I get a lot out of it. Like it fuels me to feel that I'm able to contribute and that I'm able to be of service. And I mean, when I was coming up in my career, I had a range of great mentors and people who were willing to invest in me. And I wouldn't be doing what I'm doing now without them. And so, they instilled in me a deep desire to kind of make the field that I've gotten so much from better and do what I can to be of service and helpful. And so whether it's open source projects or whatever else, that's a big driver for me, is just like realizing that, if I can create content or create programs or create connections that can help people be more impactful in their role or kind of fall in interest with the space like I have, then I'm happy to do it. So.
Wonderful. Well, thank you kindly for being on HR Bytes today and all that you do for our HR community. If our audience would like to connect with you online, what's the best way for them to reach you?
Yeah, so LinkedIn, certainly I'm very active there. On Twitter, if you're on Twitter, I'm at Lars. And then redefininghr.com is kind of the hub for all of my editorial projects and some new things that I'm working on and I'm going to be launching over the next coming couple months.
Wonderful. Well, thank you again, Lars. It's just been a wonderful, wonderful learning journey for me, and I'm sure for my audience as well. Thank you again for being here today.
Yeah, Jay, thanks so much for having me on.
Audience, thank you so much for tuning tuning in, and I look forward to bringing you more such global HR tech stories. Take care. Bye-bye.